In the mist, no one knows where these monsters came from. They suddenly emerged from the fog and began slaughtering humans mercilessly. These creatures are enormous, resembling mountains, and each step they take causes the ground to tremble. Covered in blood, Dan rushed into the supermarket, terrified. He tells the group that his companion was attacked by a monster in the mists. Dan urged them not to go outside. A man, however, doesn't believe it and insists on getting out of here. Then, everyone froze in fear. Some speculated that the mist might have come from factory emissions, while others believed it could be the result of an explosion in a nearby chemical research lab. Suddenly, the ground shook violently again, causing the ceiling lights to fall one after another. Amid the panic, the supermarket owner offered temporary refuge for everyone in the store. But a short-haired woman cried, saying she couldn't stay because she had 2 children at home. She pleaded for someone to help her get back home. Although feeling ashamed, people avoided her desperate gaze out of fear. The woman turned away with disappointment. Meanwhile, David, who was getting supplies from the warehouse, noticed strange sounds behind the iron door. In the darkness, he could sense a force fiercely pounding on the door, as if something wanted to break in and devour him whole. Terrified, David ran back to the supermarket to tell everyone about the monster in the warehouse. However, a few employees dismissed David as a coward. Together, they went to the warehouse. Young and full of confidence, Norm insisted on opening the iron door to have a look outside. As Norm opened the door, and everyone relaxed their guard.
What the fuck? Get it off! Get it off! Get this freaking thing off me! Get it off! Help me! Help me!
David desperately tried to pull him back, but 2 employees were too scared to move due to the monster's tentacles. With a piercing scream, Norm was ultimately dragged into the mist. Back in the supermarket, David revealed the existence of the monster and Norm's tragic fate. Yet, most people still didn't believe him, and some even mocked his cowardice. Soon, the entire supermarket's occupants formed factions. The rationalists, led by David, the dauntless, led by Brent, and the fanatics, led by Carmody. The exceptions were 3 guys who hid in a corner whispering low as if a great conspiracy was brewing. The rationalists, led by David, began to move dog food and fertilizer to the windows as they planned to fortify the supermarket to buy more time to wait for rescue. Brent, however, insisted that the only way to survive was to leave the supermarket and seek help from others. Despite the dangers, Brent led the Dauntless outside. David hoped that the members of the Dauntless would tie ropes around themselves, so that in case of danger, they would know how far was a safe distance inside the supermarket. After securing the ropes, the members of the Dauntless started to venture into the mist one by one. But then, an accident occurred. Suddenly, the ropes were violently pulled outward by a tremendous force. Although David and his group desperately tried to pull the ropes back, it was too late. Everyone knew that something had gone wrong, but when the blood-soaked ropes were pulled back, they all saw the lower half of a man, and they gasped in shock. As night falls, people begin to brighten their surroundings with searchlights, not realizing the threat posed by creatures attracted to light in the darkness. The first wave of monsters revealed their true form, with grotesque insects crawling all over the glass. The people in the supermarket didn't seem to be afraid of the monster because of the glass barrier. But suddenly,
Holy shit!
some people were still using light to dispel their fears, unaware that it was the beams of light that attracted the deadly creatures. The large supermarket is instantly turned into a slaughterhouse when the monstrous birds burst through the windows. Amid the chaos, a woman was bitten by a monstrous insect on her neck and fell to the ground. Despite the soldiers' desperate attempts to save her, the woman tragically succumbed, her breath fading away. However, when another monstrous insect landed on Carmody,
My life for you. Your will be done.
she miraculously escaped, setting the stage for her rise as the leader. On this side, David used his agile skills to kill a strange bird with a torch, but another bird had locked onto his son. After the riot, the supermarket suffered heavy loss of life. The dying man wished for a swift end, but David believed that obtaining antibiotics could save him. The pharmacy was just across the street from the supermarket. David prepared to lead the rationalists to the pharmacy to get the medicine. However, Carmody argued that David's plan would surely attract the monsters and put everyone's lives at risk. She fervently tried to incite the crowd to stop David. Suddenly, Irene threw a can of dog food directly at Carmody, hitting her accurately. Under the insistence of the crowd, Carmody was left with nothing to say. With caution, David led the rationalist through the mist and arrived at the pharmacy across the street. What should have been a brightly lit pharmacy was now dark and eerily silent, like a black hole. Suddenly, the group's eyes widened in horror as one human after another became entangled in spider silk. Just when they thought all the victims were dead, one person was tightly embraced by a soldier covered in spider silk from behind, and he screamed in terror. The soldier trembled and kept saying, "Sorry, it's our fault. Sorry, it's our fault." They had no time to comprehend what the soldier's words meant. They tried to pull the spider silk with all their strength to save the soldier, but suddenly, a spider fell from the sky, causing the man to scream in terror. The spiders quickly shot spider silk at them, which landed on the man's thighs, which corroded his legs to the point of serious injury, and he wailed in agony. Another spider suddenly jumped onto the face of another man, who was unable to fight back and died on the spot. At a critical moment, Ambrose picked up a wooden stick and thrust it into the largest spider's vital point, allowing them to escape by a stroke of luck, running back to the supermarket. Meanwhile, Carmody had become the people's perceived savior due to her mysterious escape before and her powerful brainwashing abilities. As for David, he and the others began to recall the words of the soldier who had been entangled in spider silk at the pharmacy. As they asked Jessup, another soldier, about the meaning of that soldier's words, the brainwashed man overheard their conversation and forcibly pushed Jessup in front of everyone. Under the pressure of being the target of everyone's anger, Jessup finally revealed the truth. It turned out that this mist was caused by a scientific experiment. Several days ago, the scientists opened a portal to another dimension, hoping to catch a glimpse of what lay beyond. However, they never expected that by doing so, they would unleash the most ferocious monsters from that dimension. Carmody shifted all the blame onto Jessup and incited the crowd to brutally beat him. Carmody claimed that once Jessup died, it would be a sacrifice to the Grim Reaper, and the calamity would naturally subside. Poor Jessup was thrown out of the supermarket despite his desperate pleas for them to let him back in. But when facing a life-threatening situation, who would show sympathy to others? Innocent Jessup disappeared into the mist. With the brainwashed crowd now turning their attention towards Carmody, David knew that if they stayed in the supermarket any longer, they would undoubtedly become the next sacrifice. Thus, David decisively led them to leave the supermarket, but Carmody had anticipated their move and was waiting for them at the entrance. Carmody once again wielded her powerful brainwashing ability, inciting people to target David's son, Billy, as the next sacrifice. David, they've taken up arms and fought back in the face of the siege. However, just as the fight was getting out of hand, Ollie fires another shot to Carmody's head. Please note that a revolver can only hold 6 bullets, and Ollie had already fired 2 shots. This detail will play a decisive role in the dramatic reversal of the story's ending. Carmody was killed on the spot, and people with weapons attempted to stop them. But Ollie's revolver had a tremendous deterrent effect. Under David's leadership, the rationalists escaped from the supermarket and into the mist. Ollie was the first to find a car for their escape, and he smiled with joy. However, Ollie dropped his revolver on the car. Meanwhile, the old man on the other side was surrounded by spiders. In the end, David, Billy, Dan, Amanda, and Irene managed to get into the vehicle. With the revolver in hand, David slowly drove the car through the mist. When passing by their home, David saw his wife entangled in spider silk, and tears filled his eyes. Then the car continued forward. Along the way, they witnessed destroyed vehicles and the bodies of slaughtered humans. The monstrous creatures, as massive as mountains, continued to roam the mist, seeking prey. Each step they took caused the ground to tremble. David's eyes at this point showed almost nothing but despair. When David tried to drive on, the sign of a bottomed-out fuel tank utterly despaired them. Listening to the screams of the monsters in the mist, they remembered the horrific appearance of the humans who'd been tortured to death earlier. So, after confirming each other's eyes, they made a choice. David counted the people, realizing there were 5 of them. but the revolver had only 4 bullets left. As to who should bear the role of executioner and face the monster's torment, David was undoubtedly the more appropriate choice. He, with a heavy heart, had to kill his own son and the others. As David was preparing to face the devastation and death brought by the monsters, fate played a cruel joke on him. The looming figure that appeared in the mist was not a monster, but a tank sent to rescue them. The belated hope from the military was far more painful and oppressive than the despair they had experienced. This ending has been the most controversial part of the film. If David hadn't led them out of the supermarket, would they have returned home safely like the people in the rescued vehicle? If Ollie had fired one less shot when he killed Carmody, would David have succeeded in committing suicide without enduring this desperate agony? Welcome, dear audience, to leave your comments and discuss below.